Hello, peoples, and welcome to Esoterica Cinema, the program where we take films from the cinematic multiverse and discuss the hell out of them. My name is Jason Peters, and with me, as always, is the man personally responsible for getting movie theaters to sell beer, Mr. Ryan Seabold!
What's up, Jason? How's it going, buddy?
I am doing well, man. I am here to discuss movies with you, one of my favorite things in the world. God, I have a hell of a movie we're looking at today in Anatomy of a Murder. Why don't you go ahead and drop a description on our audience, sir?
Hell yeah, buddy. Google has this described as: semi-retired Michigan lawyer Paul Beegler, played by James Stewart, takes the case of Army Lieutenant Mannion, played by Ben Gazzara, who murdered a local innkeeper after his wife, played by Lee Remick, claimed that he raped her. A little bit of serious content here for the podcast. Over the course of an extensive trial, Beegler parries with District Attorney Lodwick, played by Brooks West, and out-of-town prosecutor Claude Dancer, played by George C. Scott, our second George C. Scott movie in a row here, to set his client free. But his case rests on the victim's mysterious business partner, who's holding a dark secret. Dun, dun, dun. This was released in 1959, directed by Otto Preminger. It says so right on my DVD box case. And it was made on a budget of $2 million, brought in a box office of $8 million. So there's a lot of fun facts I won't steal your thunder on. We're going to get to all that here very shortly. But as always, Jason, I have to ask you is, what did you think about this movie?
Ryan, going to be happy to tell you and everyone. But first, do want to remind our audience, if you haven't yet, please like this video. Go ahead and subscribe to our channel. As well, if you agree or disagree with any aspect of this review, just want to chime in, please, by all means, drop that in the comments. We would love to hear from you. Might even get back to you there. And you can always go to our website as well. Send us some comments there. Check out more of what we have to offer at esotericacinema.com. Now, Ryan, the film opens with a simple but incredibly effective graphic sequence from a gentleman named Saul Bass, who actually has quite a reputation as a graphic designer and animator of title sequences over the years. Done some really popular ones, North by Northwest, It's a Mad, 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 Mad World, even Preminger's own Man with the Golden Arm, right?
Man with the Golden Arm, yeah.
A lot of stuff there, yeah. And in the case of Anatomy of a Murder, it's this very simple, he's kind of known for having these very sort of simple visual motifs and almost like a minimalist aesthetic. And that's very much the case here, where we get a visual of like an almost cardboard cutout of like a dead body, almost like a chalk outline.
Chalk outline, yeah. Yeah, and I was familiar with that more than I was the movie itself before I watched it. I'd never seen this before. I don't think that needs to be a cinematic confession. I think a lot of people probably should see this and haven't. So yeah. I was one of those people.
I'm sure there's a lot of people that haven't. Yeah. So, and in this case, it's kind of, you know, having a unique title sequence like that does tee off the movie, which has a lot of really sort of like idiosyncratic characteristics that make it different from most of the other courtroom thrillers, procedural dramas that we've sort of seen over the years, you know? Sure. And again, this is sort of married with this very distinctive score from Duke Ellington, who I had known by name, but to be completely honest, I mostly knew as the character voiced by Jordan Peele on Big Mouth, right? Like, hey, what's going on, Ronnie? Right? Like he does that whole thing. It's very funny. They kind of phased him out over the years because it was kind of like a one note thing, right? But yeah, you know, I had obviously Duke Ellington has this very storied career and is, you know, a celebrated jazz musician. You know, not a super big jazz guy myself, something I appreciate but never really like got super into. And I think it's one of the most distinctive aspects of this film and something that gives it's like inextricable from its DNA, you know.
It is.
That Duke Ellington score like makes this movie part of what it is, along with a number of these other things that we're going to go into here down the road.
It's my understanding, real quick, about the Duke Ellington thing. Did you see that this is perhaps the first film score that was scored by an African American that was non-diegetic music?
Yeah, absolutely. I did see that
true?
as well. Yeah. I mean, if it's not the first, it's probably the most Like if it didn't invent it, it popularized it type thing.
Okay,
right?
that's fair. Yeah.
Yeah. Also, just to explain for anybody that's watching, if you're not familiar with what exactly that term is, diegetic, maybe you've heard it around, but you've never really known exactly what it refers to. It's specific to sound. So diegetic sound is when we hear something that is being reflected on the screen, right? So what we're talking about here specifically is prior to this movie, African-American music was only portrayed as like a jazz band playing in a seedy nightclub or something like that. So we would hear the music, but we would also see the band playing it because it was supposed to be the band's music, as opposed to a score or a soundtrack where the music is being overlaid on top of the visuals and everything else like we're accustomed to. And so, yes, this was at least the first popular mainstream sort of film to feature an African-American band doing the score. So
yeah, because like you'll see like Cab Calloway in a movie, you know, and he's doing the thing, but he's on screen singing, and they're like, you know, and they'll bring him out, you know, ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Cab Calloway, and then they bring him out, and then, you know, he does his thing, but then he goes away, and then it's like, and now back to white people music, and then it'll so, you know, this was the first time they actually had that, and so anyway.
Yeah, super cool. Now, as the film begins proper, we see the opening of a wide shot where a man is driving on a desolate street at night. We've got this sort of slinky jazz playing, and it kind of sets it up like it's going to be a bit of a traditional noir, but then that quickly proves itself to be something of like a slight red herring, because we see that this film is anything but. We've got the gentleman finally arrives at what seems to be a house at first, but is actually also doubles as his law office, and he is introduced to us as Paul Beegler, played by Jimmy Stewart. And, you know, he's it definitely isn't quite, you know, the shady sort of criminal guy or detective that they set it up to be, right? Like he comes home, he's just been fishing, he drops his fish off in the sink, he likes to play piano, right? Even if it's a little bit unorthodox at the time because he's doing modern jazz, right? And it's like, well, you never assume 50 or 60-year-old Jimmy Stewart to play, you know, modern improvisational jazz, but that's part of what his character does. And it's what makes his character interesting because, you know, I think you'll agree, and we'll get to this more, but it's a rather, again, unorthodox character. You know, some of the elements of the performance and the characterization, how everything plays together is definitely unique, and I think it does work. But we can, you know, get into that here a little bit more specifically. Now, we do also cut from there to a gentleman who is leaving a bar, looks every bit the classic alcoholic that we've seen throughout film, and he arrives at the office, introduced as Jimmy's partner, Parnell McCarthy, who is played by Arthur O'Connell, was actually nominated for supporting actor role, as Jimmy Stewart was for supporting actor that year. And, you know, he quickly shows an affinity for law. They have this reverence for these Supreme Court verdicts. There's also just very quickly, they sort of establish themselves as having this sort of like sweet, like older guy relationship, right? Where they just like dig each other. And he's like, dude, what do you know, I think he asks Jimmy Stewart's character, Paul, at one point, like, what are you going to do with your life? And he's like, well, if I just sat around, you know, playing jazz and drinking bourbon and reviewing law with my good friend Parnell, that would be quite all right with me. And Parnell's like, shucks. Oh, you. Yeah, I guess.
Yeah, they're on easy
you're a good
street,
guy.
man.
You're all right.
Yeah. No, I was as I was watching this movie, I was like, yeah, it's kind of like you and I, if we practice law,
exactly.
You know?
I had a note of that very same thing. It's just like, instead of that, it's, you know, beer and cinema, but, you know, pretty much the same kind of thing.
Just two buddies doing what we want to do. Love it.
Yeah.
By the way, real quick, fucking, did you happen to catch blink and you miss it shot of how many fucking fish Jimmy Stewart has in his fridge? What's he going to do with all that fish? It's loaded to the gills, pun intended, with fish.
Yeah. And I think that, you know, and I think that's probably one of those screenplay touches that's supposed to be like reflective of character, right? Like he's somebody who like, I think he's in it for the sport. Right. And we see that in the film, right? Like you could even argue, I have a note here. It's like, why does this dude even take this case before all is said and done? Right. Like, and the answer is probably for the sporting thrill of it. And that's probably exactly why he's fishing. He's like, well, the fun is catching the fish. I don't give a shit what to do with it afterwards. Right. So now, and then of course we do have his, you know, assistant who calls attention to it. Right.
Sure.
If you catch one more fish, blah, 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 whatever. So, but, you know, right off the bat, I will say, Ryan, that, you know, we're introduced to this very sort of unique aesthetic that comprises this film's DNA. You know, we've got this marriage of very classical actors from Jimmy Stewart, George C. Scott, people may not know, but Lee Remick and Ben Gazzara are actually both from the Actors Studio and trained there together.
Okay.
And so they actually, Preminger not being much of an actor's director that we'll get into a bit down the road, they actually brought a lot of those characterizations and those moments and backstory between the two of them to life. So, you know, we get all of this traditional acting, but it's in this very sort of modern improvisational jazz score.
Okay.
And at the time, you know, this is also sort of very edgy in terms of its language. You know, it's very coarse and frank description of sexual assaults. You know, this is 1959 when this film is released.
Right.
And so we're still, you know, sort of feeling the effects of the Hays Code that hasn't quite washed away quite yet. And so it was very controversial. Like, the censors really pushed back on Preminger for a lot of this language. And as a matter of fact, very interestingly, you may have seen that this was the first film that was released, or I'm sorry, his earlier film, The Blue Moon, was like the first film released without the Producers Guild seal of approval. And so it was basically like he had to go get his own distribution and everything because they couldn't secure traditional
he went
distribution.
Independent. Broke away from 20th Century. He didn't like the studio system anyway. He seems like that kind of dude. We'll get into that in a second, unless you're going to go down that road now. But yeah, definitely. he danced to the beat of his own drum, for real.
Yeah, absolutely. So one of the things I think is just most interesting about this film overall is just like it's very unique sort of mise en scène, right?
Sure.
And again, just to make sure that, you know, anybody who is watching or listening to this may not know exactly what that term is, it's really just the aggregate collection of all the different elements coming together and what that puts on screen, right? So it's not any one thing. It's the camera work, it's the angles, it's the lighting of the camera, it's the sound, it's the rhythm of the dialogue, right? Literally just everything that makes up the film collectively we call mise en scène. And again, this film has really unique, almost you could argue disparate elements that are brought together. And I think it's done in a very organic way, but I wonder if it's the same to you. Did you feel like, you know, even though a lot of these elements are very idiosyncratic, it did end up working, you know, having a jazz soundtrack on top of like a courtroom drama and thriller? And then specifically, if it did work, like what type of experience did it lend to? Like what was sort of like your feelings and thoughts and experiences watching Anatomy of a Murder with all this unique elements coming together?
Okay, couple things. High level, you know, because we're going to go kind of scene by scene and break it down a little bit here as we go through this review and discussion. But for starters, anyone who's a fan of the show or has been watching this for a little while knows that I'm a fan of brevity. I like a short film. So when I saw this was 2 hours and 40 minutes, you know, as we announced the film in the last full-length episode for Dr. Strangelove, I shit my britches a little bit. And I'm here to tell you, this was a 2 hour and 40-minute movie that felt like an hour and a half. I have no idea where the time went. I think the score had a lot to do with that. And just Jimmy Stewart being so smooth and captivating. You know, he was the previous generation's Tom Hanks. Even though on a previous episode you said I'm the Tom Hanks of my generation, he was the Tom Hanks of his generation. So,
yeah, exactly. You guys are different generations. I'm not aging you that much, sir.
Right. So he's, you know, he's a lovable, fun-loving dude. We're moving right through. Every scene kind of leads to the next very naturally. The performances are gripping. By the time George C. Scott's there, it is fucking on. And you're like, okay, now we're getting somewhere. Because admittedly, the first part of this movie does start out a little slow. And like you said, like you got Jimmy Stewart kind of just like making fishing lures. And he's like kind of, you know, dawdling along. And then even as it starts to get into Ben Gazzara being introduced, I mean, they're introducing some heavy concepts. So I thought that was really interesting too. Again, trying to keep this very high level. You're asking me my direct response to the film. I thought it was very interesting how heavy the subject matter is. And I kind of hit on this when I was reading the Google, you know, summary at the top of the show, and I kind of chuckled and I didn't mean to, but it is funny how easily, especially for its time, you touched on this a minute ago, like how heavy-handed even just using certain words were, like rape and, you know, sperm, and, you know, it's very, very heavy. And yet the tone of the film, quite often, and murder, for Christ's sake, and cold-blooded, murder. And the tone of the film is just kind of zippy. And again, a lot of that has to do with A, Jimmy Stewart, and B, the jazz score from Duke Ellington. And just everybody seems kind of like footloose and fancy free. Even Lee Remick, who, was the woman in question who was raped. And so, she has a black eye for the first half of the movie that she covers up with glasses. Just everybody's just chilling. Like, it was just no, yeah, whatever. Dude's dead, chick's raped, fucking black eye, but I'm playing some piano, gonna pour whiskey, make some fishing lures. So I thought that, we could have got bogged down. I think if that was made today, what you'd see is almost like, I kept thinking of, legal dramas that we have, like Francis Ford Coppola's The Rainmaker, or A Few Good Men, stuff like that. So, this would kind of fall into that category and have a completely different tone, but we even get our "you can't handle the truth" moment at the end with George C. Scott. We'll get into that later, but there's a huge mic drop moment and all of that. So it's got those same beats narratively, but it's just handled differently. And maybe that is just because that's all you could do in 1959. Because as it was, like taking the conversation full circle a little bit, Otto Preminger got in trouble for even this. So I guess maybe he had to kind of lighten the load a little bit, or lighten the mood a little bit. So anyway, but high level, I really enjoyed this movie. It moved right along. I thought the performances were gripping. The soundtrack was great. I thought everything gelled perfectly. I think the only thing that, was a little odd to me is just how lighthearted some of these subjects were handled. But again, I think that was probably due to the times. And I'll comment a little bit more on that later as we get into it narratively.
Well, and the one thing that I would like to say about that is that I believe it's by design. So you probably did a little bit of research on Preminger himself, enough to know, and for anybody watching that doesn't know. So this is a guy that I knew nothing about coming into this film.
Same.
I'd seen this film once before, 3 years ago or so, let's say. And it's the only Otto Preminger film that I've seen, but I know him by name, right? Like, he's got a reputation. He was big enough that he has his names on his movies. Like you're saying, this is an Otto Preminger's Anatomy of a Murder on the box, on the marketing materials, right? Like,
they were saying he was as famous as Hitchcock at the time.
Yeah, exactly.
I did not
he was
realize
a dude who
that.
sold tickets, and I didn't realize that either, So it is very interesting to look at this because he was himself. So his father was actually the AG for the nation of Austria.
Right.
So his family was in very high esteem. He grew up very wealthy. He was always given the finer things in life, very well educated. But even when he showed an interest in theater when he was younger, his father, being such a storied lawyer for the state, said he should not go into theater, right? Like, it's not practical. You should go into law. And so Preminger actually went and got his law degree, and then was like, I still want to do theater, but I got the law degree and, we got money, so I can just bounce around wherever I like, right? So he ended up getting into movies, which obviously worked out very well for him. He did some stuff back home in Hungary, but it wasn't until he got the offer to come, I believe it was Fox maybe that brought him over, but one of the studios offered him
it was 20th Century Fox. They were actually just getting, they were just forming, and the Zanuck family and all of that were putting it all together, and they went over to Europe to go scout for talent. Because there was a lot going on over there cinema-wise. And so they found him and poached him. Anyway, carry on.
Nice. Yeah, interesting. And so what you've got a courtroom thriller that's being helmed by a lawyer, right? And so I think that what's interesting about that is, I think sort of what you're picking up on, Ryan, is the fact that this film is handled more like it's handled more like from the lawyer's point of view than it is from like the victim's point of view, or interestingly enough as well, the jury's point of view. The one thing that I didn't even realize as I was watching and then thought about it afterwards is, like, we never really get introduced to anybody on the jury. They're really not even given very much screen time, a couple shots in the background, right? And so what does that tell us? This film is about the lawyers. It's about the examination of crafting a defense and how that interacts with the prosecution. Like, it's about the creation of a defense and putting together a defense and how you have to organically introduce different elements and play this game and everything that goes along with that. And I think that's part of what makes this so unique, is because as a lawyer and as somebody who seems like he maybe wasn't the most emotionally effusive dude, Otto Preminger, that is.
You don't
right?
say. He looks like a Bond villain.
Yeah, he talks very
He looks like
stern
Dr. No.
and very,
Put a monocle on that dude and he's like Dr. Yeah.
He doesn't seem like he's like the guy you go to when like your girlfriend dumped you and you just need like a solid pick me up, right? And be like, oh, yeah, no, that was totally your fault. What'd you do?
Yeah.
But anyway, so I think that that's kind of what we're picking up on is, there's no swelling of strings. There's no, even the outbursts are kind of just given their time, and they are what they are, and we move along. We don't get these dramatic push-ins as Ben Gazzara like stands up from his, chair and makes an outburst. Like everything is sort of just presented very objectively, the way that a criminal defense would have to be, right? And I think that's what's so interesting about that is the filmmaking style reflects the story being told the way that some of like cinema's great films do, And that's what really works for me about this.
I hadn't thought of it that way. That this is like, it's just cut and dry the way a lawyer would have to look at it. Like, these are the facts. Just the facts, man.
Yeah, we're not getting emotional here. Hey, hold on. There's no place for emotion. This is logic. Right. This is reason. This is fact. This is truth. This is what is right and wrong within the confines of the law, not based on human morality. So we're going to examine it as such.
And then kind of like to even drive your point home even further, even in moments of temptation, it's almost like Otto Preminger is showing you the magic trick too. I hadn't thought of this until right this moment when you're explaining it this way. But Lee Remick's character, the woman, Mannion's wife, who was raped and all of that, she, for lack of a better term, seems to be coming on to Jimmy Stewart at various times throughout the film and is acting very friendly or open in certain ways. And Jimmy Stewart will rein her back in and say, pardon me, ma'am, but I'm here to do a job and blah, blah, blah. And it's almost like a wink and a nod to the audience. Like, we're going to bring, this is just the facts. Like, we're going to excuse the fluff and the emotion and the lust and the whatever that doesn't matter in a legal case. So, Jimmy kind of reins her back in, but also kind of reins us back in as an audience as well.
Definitely. Yeah. If this was a more traditional Hollywood production, right, with more, leading man and woman actors and actresses, then they would absolutely turn that into a thing where like the lawyer and the girl or, having a will they, won't they type of thing, right? And it kind of carries throughout the film and like, they're probably going to graze each other's hands at the bar and you're going to, again, just the whole will they, won't they. And like Preminger through Jimmy Stewart is basically like, nah, dude, we're fucking putting a stop to that right now. That ain't going down. Yeah. Not going to be a thing. Like kibosh on it. Keeping it about the facts.
Right.
Yeah, so it's very cool the way that the film does that and the way that the structure and the execution reflects that. Now, when we go back to the film narratively, Paul receives a call from a woman and she's about to divorce her husband. So she says, partner listens, tells the partner Parnell, that is, listens. He's sort of next to him on the phone and he tells Paul to take the case. So Paul does consider taking the case. The next morning, he meets the wife and the husband, and the soldier is in jail, the husband. He is Fred Mannion, played by Ben Gazzara. His wife is there as well. To your point, she has a black eye that she is hiding behind sunglasses. This is Laura Mannion, played by Lee Remick. And Fred is in jail for supposedly murdering the man who allegedly raped Laura. And this is a gentleman by the name of Barney Quill, who is the owner of an inn and bar. And Fred actually never saw this happen, but he trusted his wife's story and then in a fit of rage went and murdered him in cold blood. Now, Ryan, without a doubt, like I said, we talked about this just a minute ago. The most distinctive element of this film, arguably, is that Duke Ellington jazz score. Now, It's kind of funny, right? Because later on, jazz when I was a kid, and probably when you were a kid, I knew jazz as like smooth jazz, right? Because like that's what my mom listened to. Like out here in LA, I forget if they were national, but we had like Coast 103.5 and like 94.7 The Wave, right? And it was like a lot of like Sade and like Kenny G and saxophone music, right? You know, stuff like that. This is definitely not that type of jazz, right? This is that like swinging, like free form. You know, it's largely improvisational when it's not obviously being like written for a score the way that this is. But, you know, traditionally it's always been that sort of like swanky, you know, sort of club noir film. And I really appreciate the way that this film does kind of have that element, but then also does raise it to a more vibrant, lively sort of composition, right? Each of the instruments are sort of off doing their own thing and do some really unique things while all of that working together. And so, you know, to me, I was very impressed by it. It keeps the film moving along. I wondered what your reaction was to the score. Yeah,
absolutely. It was like Miles Davis meets the opening to Police Squad, the Naked Gun movies.
Why haven't those been put together, too?
So had a little bit of, you know, a little dragnet. You know, it was kind of because this is 1959. So the jazz scene at this point, you know, I think we're kind of moving out of, you know, that Cab Calloway, Minnie the Moocher, you know, all of that, and moving into that Miles Davis, you know, kind of. And so I think, I mean, it totally worked for me. And then there was even a scene where Duke Ellington was in the movie, you know, playing jazz in the bar and stuff live.
That was nice.
I don't know if you saw this, but it was controversial that Jimmy Stewart was actually sitting with a man of color to play music together at the same piano at that time. This is pre-civil rights. So, man, there was a lot going on at this time in 1959. And I know we're going to, you know, hit on some of these moments, but I mean, you got the Hays Code, like you were saying, it's McCarthy era. We're going to talk about the judge in this movie being the lawyer that fought McCarthy. And then, of course, you know, Duke Ellington and being, you know, a black man, you know, doing the score for this movie and then being in the movie and sitting down with a white man and blah, blah, blah. It's like so many things that you just take for granted. And it wasn't that long ago. But it's crazy how like an Otto Preminger to do these things and kind of get his way, you know, were many of the reasons he had to go independent and break away from the studio system and kind of throw the finger to Fox. And it wasn't even Fox's deal. They just didn't want to be on the hook to be blamed for all of this. They didn't want to be caught in the liability, you know, crossfire. So he's like, fuck it, I'll do it. You know, I'll do it myself. So Thanos style. So anyway, I thought that the score was tremendous. I thought that it had a lot to do with, because, you know, there's some intense stuff in this movie, you know, subject definitely. Matter. I don't mean to make light of the score and say that it was so lighthearted, but it definitely took the edge off and, you know, just kind of like, and it blended the scenes together really well. So it just wasn't, it never felt like your cut and dry state of the art score that you would expect for a film like this.
And I think one of the interesting things to point out as well is that, you know, this movie, if you look at it, it got 8 Oscar nominations. None of them were for the music. Not a single nomination for any sort of music. And that was pretty nuts to me. Yeah. Same thing with the Golden Globes or anything. But what it did win is it won 3 Grammys. It was nominated for 3 Grammys and it won all 3 Grammys, one of which was like best theme for a film, you know, best like recorded swing song or jazz song or something like that. So generally, you know, not keen to give the Grammys too much credit, but in this case, they actually did something right. So, give him a dub on this one, right?
Yeah. But I mean, if definitely go back and look up some Duke Ellington and Count Basie and stuff like that. It's some fun shit. I like getting into all that stuff.
Yeah, it's there's also, you know, so Brian and I both watched the Criterion disc that we have back at home, and one thing I will say is that, you know, I can't speak music the way that I can film, right? But there's a really interesting feature with a music critic on there who goes into like really good detail on some of the musical stuff that they're doing. You know, he talks about like glissandos and this and that. And if that means something to you, then you're definitely going to dig this feature, right? I just learned what it was by watching this, and a lot of the other stuff went over my head. But there is a lot of interesting stuff that's really going on with this score, where if you're a little bit more, if you can speak music a little bit more, you can really do some digging and find some very interesting things that Ellington's bringing to the table. So one of the interesting things here about the whole score and everything is that Preminger wanted this to be sort of like a uniquely American film, okay? Well, there's sort of two things about American culture specifically at the time that he's got a great reverence for at this point. One is our First Amendment freedom of speech protections, and the second is the American justice system, which, you know, may be flawed, but is the best and most fair system that we have out there. A lot of people would agree with that. Preminger definitely agreed with that as well. And I'll also tell a funny story about how that contrasts Russia's view of justice in just a minute. But, but the reason that Preminger chose Duke Ellington to do this is he wanted it, again, to be a uniquely American film, and knew jazz to be a uniquely American art form at the time. Mm-hmm. And so he was like, who's the foremost American jazz musician out there? Oh, it's this guy, Duke Ellington. Cool. Let's get him over here and let's have him do this film. But the funny thing is that Duke Ellington's style of jazz was still very much an outsider style of jazz at the time. It had not been accepted by the mainstream to any sort of degree. And so it's kind of funny because there's this sort of idea that, you know, it was this very important moment that a black musician was able to, you know, get a job scoring a mainstream Hollywood film. And a lot of it just could have been from a simple misunderstanding from the director and producer about what music we liked. I just think that's hysterical. He's like, oh yeah, no, they like jazz, and this Duke Ellington guy's a jazz guy, so go ahead and hire him, like with no understanding of what that meant and why that was important and how it actually was not at all customary, right? So
sure,
if he sort of knew more about American culture, you could argue that he could have made a completely different decision, which would have very much affected the DNA of this film. So that's kind of what's really interesting about Duke Ellington's involvement with this project.
It's like the whole Marty McFly thing, you know, where he's like, I guess you all aren't ready for that yet, but your kids are going to love it.
Yeah, exactly.
You know, just a little, you kind of put a set and setting into this whole thing, but this is the exact same year, too, that Miles Davis released Kind of Blue, which is my favorite jazz album.
Oh, nice.
And it's fantastic.
Awesome.
So, you know, you're kind of getting there into that era. So, you know, this isn't quite Miles Davis style. It's got a little more swank, Count Basie, you know, Frank Sinatra style stuff to it. It's got a little pep in its step, but yeah, it was definitely experimental. And to score a whole film that way, you know, instead of, like you said earlier, you know, to make it more diegetic and have it in the film as a performance, that was always different, where you'd cut to a nightclub and then that was happening. We even saw some of that in Sweet Smell of Success, where they had diegetic music, because the whole thing revolved around a jazz singer and those marijuana cigarettes. So
yeah, not the only comparison we will make to that film before this is over, by the way.
Fair.
So now, narratively, by the way, there's this very brief moment, and I'm sure it meant nothing at the time, but it's just so hysterical to me, and I'm sure you clocked it too, which is like right after this, narratively, they're about to meet with Laura so that Paul can kind of get a sense of who she is. But right before that, they decide to stop off for a quick beer and hard-boiled egg at like a local cafe. And I just thought that was like the most hysterical thing in the world, because it's
I missed that completely.
In 1959, I guess that was a thing that you and your homeboy did, is like, oh, we got to think this out. Let's go down and grab a beer and a hard-boiled egg. And so they're sitting there just like, what are we going to do about this? And they're cracking a hard-boiled egg and throwing salt and pepper and like munching it. I'm like, this is like 50, 60 years later or whatever. Like this is not something people do, but I bet it was like just perfectly commonplace at the time.
Probably.
And I just loved that. I thought it was so hysterical. So
I mean, you didn't really have a lot of processed foods and prepackaged foods probably back then like you do now. It's not like you know. So unless you want like a full steak or, you know, a burger or something, you know, or stack of
Can you
pancakes.
imagine though, like having like the egg cart, like, hard-boiled eggs, get your hard-boiled eggs. I mean, that's probably a thing somewhere. Someone's watching and they're like, yeah, dude, what's the big deal? Hard-boiled eggs.
You do see
They're
like
delicious.
pickled eggs in like a jar sometimes in a bar.
Nobody
or like
eats those.
I know nobody eats those. It was even commented on the Cabin in the Woods or whatever that we covered that. Fucking the two dudes that Dale and Tucker against evil. Man, that movie sucked. They went into a country store and they had the
like
jar of pickled eggs.
Dude. Remember how much everyone loves that movie and they hate that we hate it and we get all that shit? Just that one
Here's the
comment
thing,
alone,
Jason.
like
we're making
12
all
people
new
stopped
enemies
watching
now.
right now.
We're on YouTube. We made all the enemies we could in audio format, but we're in HD video. So come at me. We're gonna make some video enemies now. Now you know my face. Come find me.
By the way, are you watching? Did you love Tucker and Dale? Do you want to talk shit to us about that?
Tucker and Dale
Drop
versus
it in the
evil.
comments.
Hot garbage. Yeah, come and get me.
So yeah, but anyway, so after a quick beer and a hard-boiled egg,
Hey.
Paul does meet with Laura, asks about the night of assault. And yeah, very quickly we sort of see that she's not 100% on the up and up, right? She's sort of elusive about what happened. She's oddly flirtatious with Paul, very sort of inconsistent with how she's acting. And she even calls out Paul's obvious attraction as kind of like, yeah, I'm used to it. Guys like me. I'm super hot and flirty and whatever, blah, blah, blah. So, and this actually brings up like one very sort of interesting aspect of the film, which is that at no point through the entire movie do we genuinely believe that Laura and Fred are innocent. And that there's like not something weird and more to this story that happened, right? Like we kind of know that like he wasn't really insane, and we kind of know that like Paul's kind of trying to lead him on and being like, yeah, if you do this, we can kind of get you off. And again, like Paul, we sort of know that Paul's not going to get paid by these guys before the end of it. And so it's like, why is he doing this? And then again, it's just really for the sporting thrill of it all. But it never really treats it like
he tells him he's broke.
So yeah,
he says,
exactly.
I've got no money to my
I'll get it
name.
from you later.
I'm getting a paycheck on Friday, but I got an IOU. I'll put something on it, kind of thing.
Yeah. He's also like, oh yeah, I owe you $3,000. Getting $140 on Friday. Happy to give it to you. Like you're still a ways off, bro.
Right. Yeah.
So, we kind of, again, get that there's more to this story. There's more to this relationship. Again, we can touch on that in a moment. There's a lot of stuff that the two of them brought to the table through that performance and added to the screenplay that wasn't really there. But when we get back to the narrative, Paul does want his partner Parnell on the case, but he needs him sober. This guy's been a nasty alcoholic for a while. Parnell's not 100% sure he can do it, but he's going to think about it, might give it the old college try. And that's when Paul meets with Barney to discuss his state of mind. Or I'm sorry, not Barney, but Fred, excuse me, to discuss his state of mind about what he might have been thinking when he did murder Barney, and is basically telling him like, he's like, well, Fred's like, well, he murdered my wife, so he had it coming. And Paul has to be like, not in the court of law. That's not an acceptable line of defense. You're not going to get off that way. And he's like, well, maybe I was kind of crazy. And he's like, oh yeah, maybe you were. That might be a little bit different. Kind of walks away and lets him go. And so that's when he agrees to take on the case. And this leads into what I think is an interesting discussion about acting and characterization, Ryan. So in a film with a lot to offer, I think the acting is definitely some of the strongest aspect of this film, right? From Jimmy Stewart, George C. Scott, Lee Remick. Like it's awesome performances. Weighty performances across the board, breezy where they're supposed to be breezy, intense where they're supposed to be intense. I would say that there's probably like not a false performance in the bunch. So what did you think about the entire ensemble, as well as did any individual performances stand out to you?
Dude, these guys are titans. Yeah, this is the earliest work of Ben Gazzara I have seen. This is the third Ben Gazzara film that we've covered on this show. The other two being Buffalo 66 and Killing of a Chinese Bookie. Of course, you've also got everything from Big Lebowski to... So, yeah. I mean, Ben Gazzara was a smooth criminal, quite literally, in this film. Definitely. He had a crocodile smile, where you knew he was kind of slimy, he was up to something.
Couldn't put your finger on why, but you knew it.
George C. Scott We just finished covering Doctor Strangelove, and we talked ad nauseum in that episode about how out of character that performance was for him. And I don't know that I'd ever really seen a true to life George C. Scott film. And so then I get to watch this. And then I get to see exactly what they were talking about, because this was like way more intense, obviously, than Strangelove. And to see, like, to go from that, it was weird getting introduced to it flip-flop, right? Because most people would have known this.
Yeah, you were introduced to the exception performance,
right?
Instead of like knowing that to be atypical for him.
Yeah, very strange. So,
Strange love, even.
Right.
Hilarious.
Right. Yeah. So real quick, to put it even in an even greater context, he's only 2 movies removed from this and Strangelove. So he did this, he did The Hustler, and then he did The List of Adrian Messenger, I think it's called, by John Huston, that stars everybody from
that film.
Dude, it's we have to put that on our list. No pun intended. It stars Kirk Douglas, Frank Sinatra, hold on, I got it right. Robert Mitchum, Tony Curtis, Burt Lancaster, and George C. Scott. And George C. Scott. So yeah, I mean, it's a laundry list of a cast list. And directed by John Huston. So yeah.
A, can you imagine the alcohol budget on that movie? And then B, like, did you have to like keep them all in separate rooms and like shoot individually? Like, how did they not all just like start swinging at each other in half an hour being around each other?
Yeah.
Like 6, like just of the biggest alpha dudes, like, I control this set. No, I control this set. Look at George C. Scott versus Burt Lancaster. Are you kidding me?
Yeah. So, I mean, someone got pregnant when they were shooting that, is all I'm saying. Frank Sinatra is there, a young, boyish 1959 Frank Sinatra. So, yeah.
Dude, no, he was the one getting tail. Like, George C. Scott and Burt Lancaster were, like, puffing each other's chest. And then, like, he was just, like, sneaking off with their girl behind. Like, oh, you guys go ahead. I'm just going to go here.
I mean, Kirk Douglas is there. Barrel-chested Kirk Douglas, fresh off of Actually, I think that would have been, like, right in time with Spartacus. So... yeah. Anyways, so George C. Scott makes Hustler, makes that movie, and then goes right into Doctor Strangelove. So that's pretty bananas when you look at the chronology of all of it. But yeah, man, the performances were, because again, 2 hours and 40 minutes. So, and you're not really going anywhere. You're in, it's mostly interiors. And so obviously, this movie is a masterclass in pacing because it slowly ramps up to a fever pitch by the end. By the first act is very lighthearted and easygoing considering the subject matter. I mentioned that earlier. And then, but by the time George C. Scott got introduced, that's when I was locked in. Like, because at that point it's him versus Jimmy Stewart, which is just 2 Hollywood titans on screen together going at it.
Sure, yeah.
And that's when all the legal stuff starts happening. We're in the court. We're interviewing people. Like, the dominoes start to fall real quick towards it. I say real quick. It's a 3-hour movie, but the pacing amps up, I should say, versus Jimmy Stewart, boyishly making fishing lures and all of that. And like, so much of the legalese gets, brushed over really quickly in the beginning. And then we they're just like planting, breadcrumbs, because there's even a scene when he first introduces or goes to interview Ben Gazzara's character, Fred, in jail. And he goes in there, he's like, well, I'm gonna have a talking to with this boy. And then he goes in there and he's like talking to Ben Gazzara. And then he's like, well,
hold on. Can you do that again?
You're Fred, you have any kids? And then Ben's like, no, I don't suppose I have any kids. And then he's like, well, that about does it for today. I think I'll go get some lunch. And then he goes off to the diner. And like, I think that's when he got the hard-boiled steak and the beer. So
that's he just Jimmy Stewart, man. Look at you, dude. You got fucking Owen Wilson. You got Jimmy Stewart. You got Werner Herzog. Like, hire this man for your parties.
When you watch a 3-hour Jimmy Stewart movie, you walk away with a few things.
well, now, Ryan, that's a see, I can't do it. That's mine. It's not good. Like,
it's not.
Well, I don't know what I'm doing, Ryan.
Mine's not
that's
good
not
either.
good. No, yours is great, dude. I love it. Anyways.
So anyways, yeah, I thought the performances were spot on, but it's not even the performances, it's the interaction, the chemistry that these actors have together. Now, I will add that Otto Preminger, again, if I'm stealing something off of your notes, I apologize, but Otto Preminger wanted to go shoot this on location in the Upper Peninsula. We haven't even mentioned yet that this was written by John Volker, who was an attorney up in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. He was Jimmy Stewart's character. It's who Jimmy Stewart is in this movie. And so he made fishing lures just like that. So Preminger wanted to go make this authentic as fuck. He didn't want to involve the studio. He's shooting all of this independent, remember? So he's not even a part of the studio system apart from distribution. So he goes up and shoots us up there in the exact courtroom that the trial takes place. You can go see it to this very day. He shoots it in John Volker's house. That's where Jimmy Stewart resides, and that's where his little office is and all of that with the fridge. That's actually John Volker's house. So he felt that if he shot it on location, this is the point I'm getting at, that it would bring together the chemistry of the talent, that they're not just on a Hollywood backlot, I'll be in my trailer kind of thing. They're all eating at the local restaurant, hard-boiled eggs and beer, apparently, and, going out at night. And, I guess this wasn't done as often back then because they're just coming out of that studio system as we move into the 1960s, which was very much more free of that. And you get into the auteur movement in the late 60s as you move into the 70s with people like Coppola and Scorsese and all of that. You get Mean Streets and, Godfather and all these things that could be shot on location. So, I thought that, the chemistry between some of these titans of Hollywood and New York was really amazing. To see Jimmy Stewart on the screen combating George C. Scott, it was like, oh shit. Like, there were moments I was like, dude, is George going to swing on Jimmy? Like, I think they're going to, there's no way George C. Scott's going to settle for this. So anyways, I really enjoyed this movie a lot. How about you?
Yeah, definitely. And so I think one of the really interesting characterizations for me was Jimmy Stewart's Paul character. The entire cast crushed, as I mentioned. Yeah. But I'm not overly familiar with a lot of Jimmy Stewart films, but I'm very familiar with his reputation, right? Like you said, he's his generation's Tom Hanks. Everybody loves him. He's always the nice guy. He's always the objectively pure and good guy. And I think that it's interesting to see him play, not necessarily, he's definitely not immoral or anything like that, but he's not a traditional good guy the way that a lot of these sort of justice lawyers are presented in films historically, If you go back to Mr. Smith Goes to Washington, right? He's just a bang up dude. He's doing it for the right reasons. And here, we don't really know why he's doing it until by the end of the film, we sort of see that it's just for the sport and thrill of it all. And even down to the standpoint that we get the sense that Paul kind of knows that Fred did something or that, the story isn't what it is. And he never really addresses that, right? It's almost like he just sort of is one of those guys that wants to stick it to the state, right? And just see if he can get his guy off just because thumb his nose at authority or something like that. But he's not oh, this is an innocent man. We've got to get him off. I'm going to stake, every dollar that I have and sacrifice all this to get this pure and righteous dude, who was incorrectly charged with this, that, the other off, right? It's not like a John Grisham novel like that or something like that. Right. Everybody's very ambiguous. So interestingly enough, so previously I had mentioned about how the American justice system differs from Russia's and how this film parlays that. So when Preminger was taking a round of this film, he was trying to shop it to Russia, and they didn't have a problem with it per se, but they were like, no Russian is going to appreciate this film because very early on, it's very clear that Fred is guilty. And the Russian people and the Russian government couldn't understand why the American justice system would put him on trial and not just execute him immediately because he's clearly guilty just based on his behavior. That's the very big difference between American justice and Russian justice, at least circa 1959. I don't know how much has changed over the years, right? So, but yeah, they were just the guy's clearly guilty. Why don't you just put a bullet in his head? I don't understand. It's well, we don't really do that thing. It's Americans, whatever. Right?
Your freedom.
So, and again, he knows he's not getting paid, and he's just, He's this tall Midwestern guy. He's in Michigan who loves to fish, but also plays swanky, improvisational jazz. And so
he doesn't care
really
about the money. His secretary comes out and says, I haven't been paid. My last check didn't clear, blah, blah, blah. And then, he sloughs it off. He just wants to he's a lawyer in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan, which, again, doing a little research on the area that it was shot in is very desolate. It's very small town to this day. I can only imagine what it was like in 1959. But, it's golly gee shucks, everybody's very innocent and they're up there for a reason. It's very small town. And so he's not, some big New York lawyer, we're going to fight the system. He just wants to go fishing and make his lures and this and that. And he kind of, like you said, just takes this for sport. In fact, he has to be coaxed by his partner, his legal partner, to take the case. He gets a phone call, knows nothing about it. It's all over the papers. So that also kind of informs his character a little bit as well. The fact that he is so aloof, that he is, as like the main lawyer in town, doesn't know that there's been a murder by an army, guy that's like in all the headlines. He just, because he's been out in the woods hunting and fishing. And so he's separated even in like the legal news of like any lawyer worth their salt, you would think in a town that small would have caught wind of that like the day it happened. I mean, like, oh shit. And an ambulance chased their way down to the police station. But meanwhile, his legal partner is like, is that so-and-so? You need to take this case. And he's like, well, why? And then, he's got to go do it. So anyway.
Yeah,
he's not motivated by finances or any of that. I don't even know that he's motivated by the common good. I think that he's just motivated by, winning.
Purely selfish interest. No, like he's kind of showed like he doesn't have a family. He doesn't have a wife. He doesn't have kids. Right. He spends all of his time in isolation fishing unless he's getting drunk with his dude and they're reading and discussing law, which there's probably not even that much discussion as there is reading. Right. So this is a dude who keeps to himself. He's also not ambitious. Oftentimes, lawyers are, portrayed as these very ambitious people trying to make a ton of money, make a name for themselves. Oh, this is going to make me if I take this case, right? And like, he's, to your point, just like very cool being a small time nobody, taking cases for no money just because, got nothing better to do, right?
Now, I will say really quickly that, again, this was based on a real person, John Volker, who wrote this script, or wrote the story, rather, the novel that it was based on, which was a #1 bestseller all over the place. This book crushed. So John Volker was like, a successful writer coming into this. And he also graduated to become on the Michigan Supreme Court. So even though he was from the UP and was this small town fisherman dude, he did finally go, I guess, get his shit together because he's writing books and up in the Supreme Court and all of that too. So real life guy, real life Jimmy Stewart, he's got it down.
Well, yeah. And so, I mean, speaking of, real life legal people, we've also got Joseph Welch as Judge Weaver. And that wasn't something that necessarily meant much to me until I went back and looked into it and saw that he was very famous for being a lawyer during the McCarthy trials, and one who sort of like specifically had a moment where he called out McCarthy. Is the have you no sense of decency, sir? It's that guy, And so that was sort of seen as like a watershed moment in the McCarthy trials, wherein like sort of overnight everybody turned on Senator McCarthy. And again, Joseph Welch was pretty much the person largely responsible for popularizing the sentiment. And you can tell that he's not a professional actor, but it also doesn't really seem to matter, right? Like there's something about the judge character being so sort of like aloof and laid back and low key relative to all of these like theatrical titans that we're talking about, right? So even though there are elements, especially contrasted to the acting styles of these, very storied professional actors, it almost feels a little improvisational, so to speak, right? Like when you have a comedian sort of come on and do an acting role, but it very much works for this. And I think that in a film where everybody's performances are so intense and everybody is an intense character, it helps to have the judge be a little bit lighter to sort of counterbalance some of that weight along with the score. He's probably doing a lot of that work.
He's hilarious at times too, because like his introduction as he comes out into the courtroom and lays out the ground rules, straight up lets people know like, I'm prone to fall asleep every now and then, but I'm cool. Just shake me, everything will be fine. Like, I'm paraphrasing, but that's pretty
about it. Just give me a little nudge and I'll be right back up.
Yeah. Every time they go to the chambers, he's smoking his pipe, He's like, one of these days I'm going to get in trouble for this. I'm just going to light up in the fucking courtroom. So, we love the judge. It's unfortunate. I looked it up. Apparently he passed away the year after this was released. So this was his first and last performance, if I'm not mistaken.
So there's another performance that kind of stands out, and that's George C. Scott, right? You touched on it earlier. He's the AG Claude Dancer and just has this tremendously commanding presence, right? He's a very intimidating man. He's a very intelligent man. So he's even like constantly overshadowing the actual prosecuting attorney, who is actually in real life, I forget the gentleman's name at this point, but he's actually Eve Arden's real life husband, who played his assistant. Paul's assistant, that is. So, and
George C. Scott comes in from Lansing, Michigan, and then her husband that you're mentioning is he's like the local guy. So he brings in the big guns from the big city of Lansing, So that's George C. Scott's character.
Yeah, definitely. And one person I think has like the sort of sneakiest good performance is Lee Remick. I think that she does a very good job of just being untrustworthy the entire time, but in a way where you still sort of like her and root for her, or you're at least not actively rooting against her, I think that a lot of people playing this role, you'd be like, she's no good. She's clearly messing with everyone.
Sure.
Because, I mean, look, let's be completely honest. This guy Fred is on trial for murder.
He admits it, by the way. It's never, this is not a trial of innocence of did he murder this man or not, which is, usually the procedural that we're used to seeing from a movie like this is did he do it? He did it. He admits it. Like in moment one, we're introduced to baby Ben Gazzara in prison and he's like, yeah, fucking shot him dead. He raped my wife. Like, what are we going to do about that? And then, the rest of the movie ensues and we find out what we're going to do about that. But it's a very strange structure because you touched on this earlier, it's not like, dead set protagonist, antagonist, good versus evil. In fact, Jimmy Stewart even has a line in the film where he says something about, you're approaching this as if it's good versus bad or good and evil, black and white. He's like, as a lawyer, I'm familiar with the fact that people are all kinds of things. Again, I'm paraphrasing, but, basically touching on the fact that we all exist in a daily capacity in a gray area. Each one of us is doing both good and bad all the time. So it's not like, oh, he's a good person and he's a bad person. People don't categorize like that. And neither does this movie, which makes it so unique.
Yeah, absolutely. And again, sort of getting back to Lee Remick's performance specifically, I think that it would be really easy to hate this character if it was played a certain way, right? Because to my point from a second ago, there is absolutely a scenario where she slept with Barney 100% willingly, right? And then came back and rather than just fess up to the cheating to her husband, lied about it, resulting in his murder. So basically, there's a very realistic potential that she had this dude murdered rather than fess up to the fact that she willingly went and slept with him, right?
That's a
bad
person.
You're a very bad person if you do that. I should hate you, and I don't. And that's what's so interesting about the Lee Remick performance is she's able to keep you on her side, even though you know that she's probably not a good person and very well could have had this dude killed in cold blood.
There's a world we're living in where Fred, Ben Gazzara's character, could have given her that black eye or hurt her.
Absolutely, 100%.
After he found out that, these things happened with her and the dude from the bar, the guy. So, it's. But then you find out, again, we're getting way off track here, but we are hitting on some very important points. But when we progress the story a little bit more narratively, and we talk about some of these future scenes, we get to the bartender and spoiler alert, dude's daughter and all of this. It does kind of paint the picture a little better. But this whole movie exists in a huge moral gray area, and I still don't know how I feel about it. Like who I'm with, other than lovable old Jimmy Stewart. So, but if he was played by a different actor, you could ask yourself, would you have felt the same way about this movie if it wasn't, good old Jimmy Stewart,
Yeah,
I don't know.
that's exactly my point from earlier. Like, so, we mentioned it on the show a lot, like that there's a difference between acting and characterization, right? Characterization can come from the actor, but it can also be baked into the screenplay as a result of writers. Directors can bring those flourishes. Everybody can contribute to that, So if you actually look at the character on paper, it is not the Jimmy Stewart that we know. Like, you don't read this and you're like, Paul is Jimmy Stewart, 100%. Like,
No.
Paul plays much more like a Michael Shannon type of guy, right? Or a Robert De Niro, like a brooding method actor type of sort, right? Who's very in his head, not, like I said, America's favorite grandpa, right? But they cast Jimmy Stewart, and that's what just that casting lends that additional layer to the performance and to the protagonist, because again, if you have a more traditional actor, a more traditionally dramatic actor play this role, even Ben Gazzara was probably a better fit for that role on paper than Jimmy Stewart, right? He very easily could have played the lawyer.
Well, because the lawyer is kind of like small town folksy, making fishing lures, just wants to be left alone. He's not like big city guy.
But Jimmy Stewart is. But that's what I'm saying. Like, the character, I don't know, like Paul,
but the character is based
himself,
on
right?
the guy, John Volker, who was like that too. So if it doesn't read like that, maybe that's a screenplay problem. I don't know.
Well, no, but that's what I'm saying. Like, Jimmy Stewart generally isn't like the guy who keeps to himself fishing and, playing solitaire and, sitting on his lazy boy by himself, right? Like, that's going to be more of a grizzled brooding, again, like, I think like Michael Shannon, right? Like, keeping to himself, like, kind of grumpy, right? Like, brooding, all these sort of things. Like, it's not like, well, hey there, folks, it's your, it'd be like, what if you, like, we're like, oh, who'd be perfect for this? Don Knotts, right? Oh, what's going on with this, anatomy of a murder, or whatever, right? Like, that's basically, you're one step removed from him at this point, casting Jimmy Stewart. And my understanding is that Jimmy Stewart actually took a lot of these roles playing against the type that he had become known for later in his career, like into the 60s when cinema was changing and the whole studio system was breaking down and all of the independent films and stuff like that. Apparently, he stayed relevant by sort of taking on these types of morally ambiguous, not just gee golly Jilliker type of roles, because those were disappearing and film was changing and getting more serious. So this is apparently not the only type of role that he took on in the later stage of his career like this.
I have in my notes, I don't want to hear Jimmy Stewart say panties. So to your point, yeah, he's definitely playing against type here because he says it a lot and he's talking about sperm and like, coming to completion and like all these things that made the film cutting edge. It made the script, controversial and edgy. I get it. But hearing Jimmy Stewart deliver it to me isn't necessarily what I had in mind, like, I don't know. It was weird.
Okay, first of all, two things. First of all, I need to hear you do Jimmy Stewart talking sexy to a woman. Go.
Well, Jason, every time a woman takes off her panties, an angel gets its wings.
By the way, the other number two of this is I am a big stand-up comedy fan. I know you are. Did you see during the 90s, they used to play this Dana Carvey special on Comedy Central like all the time?
Oh, I'm very familiar with Dana Carvey's
the chop and broccoli
Jimmy Stewart
bit
impression. Yeah.
Oh, that's certainly a pleasurable sensation.
Right.
He doesn't think it's like Jimmy Stewart getting head in like a park or something. It's like, whoa, whoa, whoa.
Well, did you touch it? Or maybe if you jiggle it a little.
So, narratively speaking, we're back to the film. It's been several days since Laura's been seen, and Paul goes and finds her. She's in this ruckus bar. She's dancing with this handsome military guy, drinking it up. Paul confronts her. That's where she's sort of being very flirtatious and coming on to him. And that's where he's like, whoa, pump on the brakes, honey. Like, we're not doing this. Your husband's on trial for murder, and, I'm a guy who gets job done. So, let's knock this off and let's get back to it. Even though at the end of the day, there's an obvious attraction, and beyond that, there is a good chemistry between the two as far as, acting and an actor and actress is concerned. Everybody in this film, for example, has a very solid chemistry. Whatever they're supposed to be to one another, they are that thing to one another.
Yes.
And I think that's really well done. So we have the next day where the trial actually starts. That's when we're introduced to the Judge Weaver character. And the rest of the film, to your point from a while ago, it's entirely in the courtroom. So probably close to an hour has maybe passed. And for the next hour and 40 minutes, 45, we're in the courtroom and we're never leaving. We're in this one place. And so for these 90 minutes to just move along the way that they do is a testament to the overall filmmaking skill. It's a testament to Otto Preminger's sense of pacing. The other interesting thing about it is that it doesn't move artificially, right? Oftentimes, a filmmaker will need to use a lot of editing to speed the pace up, or sort of, cut past a lot of narrative exposition and dialogue-based exposition. And he doesn't do that, Preminger. He lets all of that speak. And as a matter of fact, he had a very interesting view of edits where he actually went on record as saying that he believes every edit in a film interrupts the viewing process. And so as a result of that, he went out of his way to use as few edits as possible. And so we'll notice that there's a lot of longer takes, 2, 3, 4, 5-minute takes, camera movement, dolly shots, things like that. That's a direct result of Otto Preminger's disposition towards not necessarily approving of edits as, interrupting your processing of what's going on. So we see a lot of those longer takes. And generally speaking, when you have longer uninterrupted takes, it's actually the opposite, right? Those can feel very long if we haven't had an edit in 2, 3, 4 minutes, and so sometimes, you have a 90-minute film that's a series of, 4 to 7 minute takes, and that could feel like 3 hours just in and of itself, because there is something about the edit that does sort of move along, and it's like a little reset, I think, for our brain, right? I think it's the same concept. Why can we watch 5 1-hour episodes of television in a row, but we can't watch one 4-hour movie, back to back? It's because your brain gets those little moments, those reset moments, right? Even if you stay seated, when the credits are rolling, your mind's taking a break from what's going on. You're thinking about something, check your phone real quick. Even just those 30-second break, your brain can take advantage of that. So all of that to say that it really just makes the pacing that much more impressive to then stack on top of that these really long shots and sequences.
Sure. It's like listening to Fish, It's like you get this big long 25-minute song. It's like I could listen to 5-minute songs, no bigs. But you give me that 25-minute song, it's like, is this still going?
Oh boy, yeah. They're really working that scale there, aren't they?
Get it. Moving on.
Yeah, so now we have the Paul Beegler character. He's beginning to plead his case, right? He's objected to at every turn by the DA, Mitch Lodwick, who's played by Brooks West. That's Miss Arden's husband, as well as the dancer character played by George C. Scott, right? And, we see both sides sort of sparring together, and the judges pace it, but he's also sort of constantly dismayed by what's going on. And, Paul hasn't even made his defense, 20 or 30 minutes into it, right? And we don't even know right off the bat that the defense is actually going to play this defense of irresistible impulse / temporary insanity yet, right? It's not made clear up front. It's something that has to be introduced as part of the defense in a very organic way. And this gets back to what we were talking about where, this is a film about the lawyers and them constructing a case and the way that a case needs to be prosecuted and defended and the subtle ways that you have to manipulate juries and people and information and when you do and don't introduce it and how much you do and don't let on and all of these things. And so that's sort of what we're seeing sort of organically take place over the course of these first 20 or 30 minutes in this courtroom.
It's also introduced to us as the audience, as an aside, that Beegler, Jimmy Stewart's partner, McCarthy, has gone off away. He borrowed the car.
Yeah, Parnell.
He doesn't have a license, and he's just gone away. And the secretary won't reveal where he's gone. We just know that he's off on this little side quest. So, so he's off doing some shit that will actually have a big payoff at the end as well. We'll get to that in a bit.
Yeah, absolutely. So we see Laura take the stand, and, Dancer's trying to paint this picture of her as this sort of very promiscuous and, flirtatious sort of person, may have even engaged in some consensual intercourse with Barry, right?
The old, he gets into the old "what was she wearing" defense that we, are still dealing with. To this
she was
day,
looking pretty suggestive, and I think she sure was swinging her hips every time she made a pinball score there, right?
Yeah, right.
I also love the way that Paul ends up flipping on that. I believe this comes much later. I believe it's with the bartender, kind of towards the end of this whole sequence, but. He's trying to basically make that case against her, and then Paul's like, so was there a lot of dudes around her? And she was like, no, not really. I was like, okay, were a lot of dudes pointing and talking about her? And he's like, no. So I was like, so really it was just you and Barney that were paying a lot of attention to her, right?
Yeah.
So maybe this is a you guys thing and not a her thing, right?
Right. Bartender, by the way, played by Murray Hamilton. Did you see that? Murray Hamilton, the fucking mayor of Amityville in Jaws.
That's great, dude. Yeah, no, as you say it, it's like, you can totally see it. Got a little bit of a Ryan O'Neal look to him, but
a little bit.
Minus the meth.
Maybe Murray Hamilton. I mean, I've only really known him as that. So Jaws guy. So anyway.
Yeah. Now, one thing that we've sort of touched on, but we haven't really got into great detail about, is sort of the camera work and the cinematography overall, and with along that sort of like the blocking and the shot composition and lighting, I found all of this very phenomenal. I think it's a strong reason for the film's success for a lot of the reasons that we were just talking about. Mm-hmm. Was it something that stood out to you as you were watching? Did it call attention to itself at the time?
No.
Or is it something that you didn't really realize until you went back and looked at it afterward?
Correct. It's so good you don't notice it. It's so smooth. Right. Because to your point, you are in that courtroom a lot. I think the only time you leave in Acts 2 and 3 really is to go to the bar. To go meet with the woman and the bartender, to go get more evidence, parse things together. But the blocking, the way the camera is revolving around, the reverse and first shots and so forth, it's so buttery smooth. You don't even notice it. It's just happening, and you're along for the ride. You get a lot of long takes, but none of it is so look at me, we're not like, going around through the jury box and going behind head. It's not gratuitous. It's so, just very, very subtle, but amazing. And the lighting is, pretty cut and dry. I don't think he did a whole lot with lighting as far as like the noir, Maltese Falcon kind of. Correct. Yeah. Casablanca style lighting. It's all very, he's in a courtroom in the Upper Peninsula of Michigan. So it's all kind of, I won't say it's flat, but it's not like super dynamic and high contrasty either. But you don't want it to be. You don't want any of these things to be, because this is an actor's show. Like, this is all on the performances of, you want people to be focusing on the intensity between George C. Scott, Jimmy Stewart, Ben Gazzara, all the Lee Remick, and all these people, and trying to just suss it out in your head, the good and evil of it all. And you're in the throes of this, existing in this gray area. So I don't think you would want the cinematography to call attention to itself. It would pull you out of the movie at a time when you should not be. But it's very, very good. Yeah. And my understanding is that with black and white photography specifically, this is actually kind of more impressive than it might otherwise sort of seem, right? Like, because black and white, my understanding, like, that's why you see a lot of noir films have really harsh, high contrast lighting, is because black and white photography naturally lends itself to contrast. But getting a nice even picture that doesn't feel flat, to your point from earlier, there's definitely a certain skill in doing that, So sure, especially when you're moving the camera around so much. Correct. Yeah, exactly. So the fact that they were able, I would have to imagine they lit practically, sort of in like a Conrad Hall type of scenario where, the set was lit or the location was lit, and they were able to just move around as they would, instead of like, let's set up for this shot, let's set up for this shot, let's set up for this shot. And I would imagine that
works well for Preminger, who's got a very naturalistic style, right? He's going to want it to feel like a documentary, which it does. It feels kind of like a polished documentary. To your point, the camera movements are there, but they're subtle. It's not this Michael Bay whipping through, or even, a more pronounced but still reserved Paul Thomas Anderson push-in shot,
Sure.
which feels good and elegant, but is still calls attention to the fact that this is a camera shot, right?
Right.
So,
like I would have expected in a modern film like this, I would have expected like a Dana Dolly shot going through the jury box, going like an over the shoulder as it goes behind the front row of the jurors, kind of giving you a juror's perspective from the jury box looking into this, but like going behind all the heads, maybe seeing them interact with certain things, or, someone giving a cough off to the side. I don't know. But regardless, there was nothing dynamic like that at all. It was more like a really, really good stage play, just a very dynamically shot, performance-driven piece, especially in these late moments of the film.
Definitely, yeah. And it was photographed by a gentleman named Samuel Leavitt, I believe is how you pronounce his last name. Consistently working cinematographer for about 20 years. He was Preminger's guy. He shot most, if not all of his work during the period that he was active. The big film that launched him was he shot Star is Born. It was like the fourth film that he ever shot.
Okay.
And after that, it's really not a lot of storied films. He stays working, but he doesn't really make a lot of films that like resonate, culturally or, are remembered through time. As a matter of fact, he wins an Oscar for a film that I've never heard of until looking into this, called The Defiant Ones, which was actually a Hollywood action adventure with Sidney Poitier and Paul Newman, I believe.
Okay.
And then later in his career, he goes out, I think it's like his fourth or fifth to last film. He shoots Guess Who's Coming to Dinner with Sidney Poitier as well. So,
got it.
Yeah. So definitely interested to see more of his work.
Spoiler alert, it's Sidney Poitier that's coming to dinner.
What?
Yeah, he's coming to dinner.
Is he a fine, upstanding Caucasian gentleman, Ryan?
No, he's not.
What?
Spoiler alert.
Shocking.
Yeah, Sidney Poitier.
But also, that movie was a watershed moment and did do a lot of things for those, so props to that. Also, just as a personal note for anybody out here in the Los Angeles area, the photographer is from Woodland Hills. So local guy out here. Yeah.
And what's his name?
Samuel Leavitt is the guy's name.
Samuel Leavitt.
Yeah.
All right.
Love it or leave it.
Yeah.
And so one of the interesting things
I hope that's on his business card. That's Samuel Leavitt. Love it or leave it, I say. You call me if you will, and leave me alone if you don't.
Yeah. And, I think that also one of the reasons that it's shot this way, and it does let it speak for himself, is Preminger was big on this idea that like when we do a close-up on an actor during an emotional moment, we're telling the audience exactly what to look at. And that's true. And, I don't necessarily think there's anything wrong with that, but it's a unique viewpoint that we don't necessarily want to do that all the time as filmmakers. So he would instruct the framing such that there was never just like one thing in frame, right? If we do have a close-up, if we do have a single rather, it's going to be in a wide or a medium wide. So we're going to see more of the environment around them, maybe some people in the background. But generally speaking, instead of just going shot, reverse shot with close up, he's going to go shot, reverse shot with like a medium wide. And then he's going to put the other person that he's talking to there. And then he's going to put somebody else in the background. We even have that great sequence where
I know exactly what you're getting to, buddy.
Where Laura's being interviewed and Claude Dancer is like trying to block her view of making eye contact with Paul to sort of like trigger whether she should say yes or no or what she should do. And so then like Paul will like move over so that he can see behind his shoulder. And then Claude moves back to like block him and do this. And it's this like very
see Jimmy
lovely
Stewart like poke out from
synchronization.
behind George C. Scott
just like
and coming off to the other side. Oh, I love it.
Like they might as well have had those cartoon sound effects. Like,
yep.
Right? Like,
and so by the way, that is something I did notice, and it was at this very scene that I noticed it, is that there are no close-ups really or singles. Everything is group shots. And I noticed it when I saw Jimmy Stewart poke, because I didn't know they were going to make a thing of it, and he was going to have like a monologue about it and saying he's trying to block my view and blah blah blah. So I thought it was just something
like
that was done for me,
kind of thing. Yeah.
Right. And so, I noticed like, holy crap, like this whole thing is shot in wides with deep focus. There's no shallow depth of field. yeah, it's just like, because like half of the magic isn't always in what Jimmy Stewart is saying. It's watching George C. Scott's response to it, or
Correct, yeah.
watching George C. Scott with the dog on his lap, all awkward and stuff like that, and then having Jimmy Stewart make some quips about it, and all of that. Mm-hmm. But it's this interaction, it's the chemistry of the cast that is the glue of this film to me, not necessarily like 1-star performance. You know what I mean?
Correct. Yeah, no, definitely. It's an ensemble performance, like we speak.
Because even when everybody you have close-ups on the witness box or whatever it's called up there by the where the witness goes, and so you'll have he shot it in such a way, almost like on a 45. So you'd have the judge, behind him responding. Mm-hmm. You'd have George C. Scott or Jimmy Stewart on the left side of frame questioning. So it would always be like a 3-shot, and I think every now and then you might have a single on the witness if they were saying something really emotional, like Lee Remick or something like that was giving some substantiating thing. But anyway, yeah, I thought that it was very subtle, but yeah, it was very weird that it was shot in all wides.
Yeah, and I touched earlier that it wouldn't be the only time that we make a Sweet Smell of Success reference, and specifically with the camera work and the direction regarding the camera work. That's to me what most felt like this. Like this film, and it's because I believe that Preminger and Alexander McKendrick, who made Sweet Smell of Success, had a similar outlook with regards to edits, right? Like we reviewed Sweet Smell of Success on the audio podcast. We'll go ahead and link to it here if you want to check it out right now. But that's something where he had a similar outlook, where he wanted these really long takes, right? We talked about how there would be certain sequences in Sweet Smell where it would be like a 5-minute take, and there would be something like 30 different marks that the actors had to hit over the course of this sequence, and the camera tracking along with all of that. And so you see a lot of that here, where it is subtle in the way that it's done. And then you take a look at it on the back end, and you're like, oh, wow, I didn't realize that was a 5-minute take with this many camera movements and the actors moving 30 different times, hitting 30 different marks and all of that. And so very similar to what McKendrick and James Wong Howe, the cinematographer, did in Sweet Smell of Success. We see a lot of that here in Anatomy of a Murder as well.
I had not thought about that. That's a great comparison.
Yeah. Now, narratively speaking, we've got testimony given from the 2 psychologists. By the way, I understand we're kind of skipping around a little bit here at the end. It's really just, it's an hour and a half of different witnesses and people coming up and going, right? So rather than just be like, this guy comes up here and then sits down, and this guy comes up here and sits down, right? That would get boring very quickly. So we're just going to kind of go through this in a sort of high level manner. But there are a couple very important people along the way, like Mary and the bartender that we're calling out and such. So to that point, Ryan, if there is anything that I gloss over that you want to specifically call out, feel free to go ahead and do that. But we have the, like I said, it's testimony from 2 psychologists. One is from the Army, who is obviously going to be sort of the pro Fred guy. And then one is hired by the state, who is going to be the pro AG guy. And as we expect, the young guy says that, oh yeah, this Mannion guy, like 100% was suffering from temporary insanity, irresistible impulse. The older guy's like, I didn't see any claim of that whatsoever, right? Didn't see any evidence of that. Could very well be lying. And that's when sort of Dancer floats this idea that like Laura could very well have slept with Barry consensually. And there's even a moment that he references. So they talk about how when Laura came home and told Fred about the assault, that he actually asked her to pray on a rosary that what she was telling him was accurate and 100% true. And then when she did, he went and he murdered her. And so Dancer tries to introduce that as evidence of their sort of like fraught relationship, right? Like, hey guys, I know they're presenting these two like they're this happy young couple who's super perfect and blah, blah, blah. But like, there are some very serious questions and some very serious allegations that may or may not have been made here that may be true. And the funny thing about it, Ryan, is that's absolutely true. Like, we as an audience, like, know that's the case, And I wanted to discuss that, the state of that relationship between Laura and Fred, because so little is directly revealed about the fraught nature of their relationship. Like, we learn absolutely nothing. Like, we don't know if he hit her or not. he even asks her if he ever beats his wife on stage at one point, and he says no. And we know that's not true because they just had a conversation about him beating her up at one point, right? So we know that there's domestic abuse involved in this relationship. We know that she's promiscuous and flirtatious and very likely sleeps around behind his back. This is why he stays with her. She's a beautiful woman, but she's not faithful, drives him crazy. He's probably got a lot of his shit too. And yet none of this is really expressed explicitly. It's all just these little moments, these little looks, so like specifically there's 2 moments between the two of them, between Laura and Fred, that the actors Ben and Lee introduced that are just great. And one is when Lee is leaving the stand and he's going to take it, and they just stop and they just look at each other and give each other this look of like, are we fucking each other over or not here, right? Like, there's so much said and not said in that one look that you could break down and probably do a whole special featurette on what that means. And then beyond that, the most telling part is slightly thereafter, where they're both going to smoke cigarettes, and Laura has her lighter out. She lights her cigarette. She goes to light Fred's, and he waits there for a minute and then like brushes aside and like grabs his own lighter and like lights his own cigarette.
I noticed that. Yeah.
Yeah. So like, this is a fucked up, like these people have a very fucked up relationship, right? Like they love each other and hate each other. And if they love each other, they probably don't like each other very much at this point, right? But at the same time, they're in cahoots. They probably have the same hangups, all this sort of stuff, right? By the end, they'll run off together, possibly into the sunset, right? After they win this thing together. But you even get the sense that they're just going to go right back to cheating and drinking and beating up on each other.
That's what I was thinking. Yeah, nothing was remedied with this whole thing.
No.
Yeah.
And so again, it's this very interesting
thing. But that's our legal system.
Hey. But from a characterization standpoint, we know they're not who they say they are. Paul, who's the protagonist, who we like, knows that they're not say they are, despite that is doing everything in his power to get them off. And to me, that just colors this movie in such an interesting way, where you know that like there's something about these two and they're not 100% innocent and they're probably even very guilty. And yet I'm still not rooting against them. How do they pull that off? It's amazing.
Yeah, I wasn't necessarily rooting for them either.
I think that's the thing. Like they're very complicated, like so many
the whole
people
movie's complicated.
Nobody's
I don't know that
objectively
I was rooting,
good or bad.
It's like I wasn't rooting for anybody. Even in the end, when they got off, I did not feel relieved by that or vindicated that, with the exception that I just inherently liked Jimmy Stewart. But yeah, this was just a fly on the wall procedural. This wasn't a good or bad, I hope, they stick it to him and blah, blah, blah. Because at the end of the day, George C. Scott was right about a lot of stuff. And so, it's not about who's right or wrong. It's about what you can prove in court,
Exactly.
Who's going to be the better lawyer.
It's what we said up top. It's about the case. This is a movie told through a lawyer's point of view. They honestly do not. I didn't kill my wife. I don't care. Same thing, right? They're like, don't care if you killed him or not. It's my job to get you off. That's the only thing I'm here for. Or it's my job to put you in jail. That's the only thing I'm here for. Don't give a shit about you as a person and what you did.
And one of the main reasons they got off was that precedent that Homeboy found in the Supreme Court case trials in some book from 1866 that was like fucking literally 100 years ago. They found some small court case where, they were able to prove that, you could do this if you had the right motivations. It
was called irresistible impulse was the specific word that they used. And the Michigan Supreme Court had a precedent where a case prior to that, it was determined that if a man killed another man in a state of irresistible impulse, the state would not hold him accountable.
Right. So then all they had to do was prove the impulse, which would have been triggered by the rape. So if the rape happened, then that could have very easily triggered the irresistible impulse or whatever from Ben Gazzara's character, Fred. And then he was, and then that paired with the temporary insanity plea got him off scot-free. And so, and it worked. But I don't feel good about that. He still
Yeah.
admits to murdering a man in cold blood, you know. And it's like, it's also one of those moral quandaries. Like, you're a married man, Jason. If somebody did this, you know, and this happened to you, you know, I would feel if it happened to me, I would feel very justified going to take actions into my own hands. And I would probably black out and, you know, I could see a situation where this could happen to somebody, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
If it did indeed happen. But that's the thing is at least for me, at no point do I think that actually happened that way, right?
What, that she got raped?
Yeah. Or if she did that, like honestly, my personal opinion, I do not believe she was raped. I believe the scenario that I brought up earlier. I believe that she probably did willingly sleep with Barney. We've already established.
What was she wearing? Defense?
It's not that. It's not that defense specifically. It's the fact that the film has already presented by nature of their relationship that she is a promiscuous woman. And it reinforces this by the fact that she's dancing with the soldier. She's coming on to Paul. Let's be 100% clear. She doesn't not sleep with Paul because of her own decision making, right? There is very much a scenario where if Paul's like, "What's up, girl?" she's like, "Just looking to bone. Let's go," right? Like, and that happens. And I believe that.
There's
about
also
that
a scenario though that she's just super flirty, not getting the attention at home. Fred's neglectant, and he's always at the shooting range and off doing duty shit. And he already did tours in Korea, so you know maybe she's just neglected and wanting that attention. Just because a woman is seeking out certain kinds of attention or being flirtatious does not give a man license to come to fruition or whatever they were saying in the movie.
Yeah, of course. Yeah, that's the whole point of the film, right? And we and we all agree with that. But the question that the film asks is, do you believe her or not? Right.
Right.
And if you believe her, then this entire thing, you know, it could be justified. And if not, then it's, you know, an act of cold-blooded murder, essentially. And the film's not going to tell you whether it is or not. It's going to present the facts and it's going to leave it up to you. And again, that's that whole objective nature. I do think within the confines of the trial that everything that happened like was the correct interpretation of what happened. But really, if you actually take a step back, what really, because Dancer is pretty much winning the entire time. What ends up being his downfall is that he makes a gambit on this Mary chick, not having information about her, that ends up making him look foolish and immediately turns the jury against him. And that's funny because that's also very much reflective of the Paul Welch, Joseph McCarthy situation, where McCarthy had been building up a prosecution for a long time and then made the wrong gambit on this one particular young man who turned out to be innocent. Welch then called him out for that, and immediately overnight, public opinion turned against McCarthy.
Wow. I did not know that. That's cool.
Yeah. So there's parallels there, you know? So, and again, you know, if I thought that she was just being flirtatious and never did anything beyond that, then of course, you know, it would be unacceptable. It's not, you know, she had it coming or something like that. That's ridiculous. But, you know, again, either she's just a lonely, flirtatious woman who doesn't follow through on these things and just likes attention because she doesn't get it at home and is taken for granted of by a man who may or may not be sleeping around on her and all of that. Or like she's legitimately somebody who sleeps around on this person. They probably very well could both sleep around on each other. I just see him as one of those like almost like a modern day sort of like hillbilly white trash kind of couple, just constantly fighting and fucking, right? And like getting around on each other. But when it comes time, it's like, well, we got to stick it out together, right? Again, I think he fucks around on her just as much as she does on him. I think they're both toxic to one another. And because they're such and I think that they're such toxic people that they have to be with each other because the level of toxicity is so strong that it would corrupt and pollute anybody else.
Skip to our next Ben Gazzara experience in Buffalo 66. We see that, from old Vincent Gallo. Vincent Gallo wines. Just fuck you. That's why. Link below. So, the linchpin to this whole defense comes right about this time in the movie, because we could spend hours discussing going back and forth. But old boy McCarthy has gone to Canada to go explore the nature of this woman who is running the bar. This man who was shot and killed owns a bar. It's now being run by Mary Pilant. We find out that she was like his manager. He was an ex-fighter, this shootist, and all of this. So who's this Mary Pilant character? She's very young, pretty girl. And so old boy goes up to Canada and researches her backstory, finds out that she's the actual daughter of homeboy that owned the bar that got shot. Yeah. So...
And she works there at the bar and inn.
And she's working there now, running the bar. She owns it or whatever. It was like willed to her. And so, because they had asked Jimmy Stewart asked the bartender at some point earlier, the future mayor of Amityville, why aren't you, so is this your place now? He's like, no, I just work here. And he's like, this is Mary Plant's place, blah, blah, blah. So now we get her on this stand or she volunteers. She gets invited just to come. Go ahead.
Just real quick. I do just want to give this for anybody who didn't see the movie, who's still here, or maybe you saw it and it didn't quite 100%. The whole thing about Mary is people don't know that Mary is Quill's daughter, right? This comes as a big reveal later. The reason that they don't know, and the reason this is kept, is because she was actually born out of wedlock. Okay, he had an affair with someone, and so she's his daughter. But this is 1959, where such matters are much more scandalous and not accepted. So she has kept her relationship to Barry Quill hidden. So when Barry dies and she inherits everything, the sort of commonly accepted scenario is that the two of them were involved in a relationship, a romantic relationship. She was
his mistress. Correct.
Exactly. And he was having an affair with her because they couldn't come out and say that she was his daughter. And what other reason is there that he would leave everything to her? Right. So that's where all of that comes from. And that's what sets up the misplaced gambit on the usually intelligent and on the ball Claude Dancer, right? He doesn't have that information. So he's assuming the same thing everybody else does at this point.
Lee Remick's panties in the laundry chute.
Correct.
Because that was the whole thing for the whole movie. The reason why I have to hear Jimmy Stewart say panties 47 times is because they're looking for them. Because apparently they were torn off in the throes of passion / rape and thrown out the window or discarded somewhere. And no one could find them. So they found everything else. They found her sunglasses case. They found her dog. They found everything. By the way, we haven't even talked about the dog. That dog rips shit. Good old the flashlight, drinks beer in the afternoon, like no one's business. Can you pour a little for homie? Yeah. Beer for the dog? Absolutely.
Lunch beers.
So, whiskey for my men, beer for my horses. So, so they find that she finds the panties, and so she volunteers to go up on the stand, now realizing, I think I actually have some information that you guys would probably want to hear. She's apprehensive because she doesn't want it to come out, like you said, that she was in this not accepted patrimony or whatever you want to call it. Her dad was out of wedlock. So, and then you get this loggerheads of George C. Scott thinking he's just got her and he's going to turn the screws and he's going to be like, so now you think this, and kind of drilling her, getting her to admit that they were having an affair. And were you like in it in that moment, or were you kind of just like, because I was locked in. George C. Scott is magnetic in these moments.
Yeah,
like,
definitely.
He was yelling and he looked so fierce and mean. And I was like, and he's like right up in her grill. I was like, oh shit. And he's like, well, tell me what was your relationship with blah, blah, blah. And then she pauses and she was like, I'm his daughter, weren't you sleeping with him or something very accusatory. And, I was like, oh shit. Like mic drop moment, dude. I loved it so much. So much.
I did. Well, and right before that too, because we that's where we have the moment where we're not really sure if he's going to be exposed or not, Fred that is, right? Because they have the surprise witness, and it's the guy who's in jail next to him, and he's basically like, oh yeah, I heard him say that he fooled the judge and he fooled the lawyer and he's gonna get off scot-free. And like that's the one time where we get this very sort of explosive outburst of like, you're a stinking liar, right? Like and the funny thing is it's those moments that I think actually do reveal that this guy is he probably did do that, right? Sure. Like even though Paul discredits him,
I was wondering that also.
Yeah, exactly. And this is the interesting thing that behind the characterization, which is that like Fred never responds that way to anything, right? Like whatever you say, Fred's got a story for it, right? And he's just going to blow it off and all of this. So for him to have such an emotional reaction, I was like, oh, that's absolutely true. Like, he's afraid that, his cover was just blown or whatever. And he just had this emotional outburst the one time where, he wasn't able to keep it together because, there's probably truth to that statement. Yeah, exactly.
We saw the wolf in sheep's clothing for just a brief second. Yeah,
exactly.
You're right.
Yeah.
I'll give you that.
Yeah. So
I
that's
thought the same thing.
Yeah. So that's what I think this movie does is I think it's like, here's what everyone's saying, but then here's some little clues that tell you that like, it's not actually that, right? So yeah, but we do see that Paul is able to discredit the gentleman before Mary ends up taking the stand. And, this is where Laura takes a stand, says Quill tore off her underwear, but it was never found. And then that's when Mary is like, oh shit, I actually remember seeing those underwear, because up until this point, you have to remember. So like when we get the moment where they go to they actually go to visit, it's like the one reprieve we get from the courtroom for a moment where they go to visit Mary at her place of business because they're trying to get Al Packett, who was the bartender who actually witnessed the crime, to provide testimony, and he won't, and they kind of feel like it's out of some sort of like misplaced allegiance or loyalty to Barney, right? And she also disallows it. So when you sort of reverse engineer that, like this guy is coming and basically saying, hey, I want you to let me interview this guy so that I can prove that your dad raped a woman. Why would she say that? At this point, she does not believe her dad to be anything but an upstanding good dude. And so she just shuts him off like, no, you're not going to do that. It's when the whole thing about the panties not being found are revealed, then she remembers, oh shit, I saw those panties. They were in the laundry room. And, there's a laundry chute directly next to who is now revealed as my father's room. Like there's a very real scenario where he did this. And so then that's what prompts her to come forward.
Right.
And
by the way, pull out the largest pair of panties I have ever seen in my entire life. Those are parachute pants, MC Hammer style, circa 1991 panties. These things are ginormous. So the whole time it's like, ooh, she's so sexy and da. And then all of a sudden it's like, these are my panties. And it's like, everyone's like, and then it's just like granny panties. And I'm like, holy shit, those are pantaloons.
Maybe it's like a horses don't look like horses on film, so you got to paint cows thing. It's like, oh yeah, no, appropriate sized panties look like children's panties, so you got to use giant panties so they look like regular person panties.
I'm here to tell you that didn't hold up well.
or also possible, too sexy for 1959. What do they do? Like pull out a thong and they're like, no, granny panties. I don't think those existed back
then. Yeah. I don't think those existed back then, but it was it was just very funny because the whole time she was proposed as this very sultry woman of the night kind of person, and then it's like these are underwear, and it's these giant white JCPenney catalog,
yeah. So this is narratively, this is where we have Mary on the stand. Dancers think he's got her dead to rights. He's gonna prove that she was sleeping and having an affair with him. It's gonna bust the case wide open for everybody, and then she reveals the information that no, Barry was in fact her father. And because of that, instantly the wins over everybody, kind of just like I was saying about overnight. It's very similar to the McCarthy trial there. So with the trial over, everybody goes back home for the night. The jury's deliberating, and we see Paul, Parnell, and Maida go back to their home/law office. And we do get a nice, sort of little soliloquy about Parnell, where he's talking about the importance of juries and, waxing philosophical about the nature of justice and juries and how important they are and everything. And it's a nice little moment before we quickly return back to the courthouse, where we learn that Fred is quickly proclaimed not guilty by reason of temporary insanity. I also think it's, again, a very hilarious touch and says so much about the characters that while they're reading this jury verdict, Laura has already gone and gotten smashed, and she's too drunk to be in the courtroom. So she's like, right. I'm tipsy. I'm going to be waiting in the car. Let me know what happens. Thanks. Right. Like, and again, it's,
he's like, don't you want to see what happens? She's like, it'll be fine. I'll be in the car.
I don't care. And, again, it's these moments that color my particular, interpretation of who she is as a person. Again, they're ambiguous. They can be looked at, many different ways. But again, she's not sticking around either way. And, they being Paul and Parnell go to visit Fred and Laura at their trailer the next day. They're going to go collect their fee. And, as they show up to their trailer, there's a note sitting in like a fire pit that basically says, sorry to leave you guys hanging like this. I was overcome with an irresistible impulse to leave. Right. And they kind of look at each other and smile and, drop the note in the fire pit as it burns away. And then we get those, sort of like odd flute chirps that sort of like close out the film, right, in a sort of unsettling sort of way. And that sort of wraps up our experience with Anatomy of a Murder. So there's a great film. Now, Ryan, before we go ahead and wrap this up and get to the formally wrapping this up, one of the things that I wanted to ask you here real quick is I did ask you if to go ahead and we watched the special feature on the Criterion disc, and it was called Firing Line. Did you catch that segment? Yes. So one of the very interesting things about Preminger's disposition, and I kind of wanted to ask you what you thought about this, is so Preminger was very much on record as saying he did not agree with the whole nature of censorship, right? 100%. Censorship is wrong. I saw what happened in Nazi Germany when, people weren't allowed to speak, et cetera, et cetera. First Amendment, freedom of speech rights, most important thing, blah, 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 right? So like, cool, that was his disposition. However, he also held a disposition that obscenity laws were good and were accurate. Right. And so it was like, that was very
confusing to me.
And that's kind of what I wanted to ask you is how do you think that he sort of resolves this idea that, if somebody says, hey, you can't show that in your movie, I'm going to cut it out in order for you to exhibit the film, that is wrong. But saying, hey, you can't have this in your movie, I'm not going to cut it out, but I'm going to let you show it and then arrest you for indecency or obscenity. Like, how do you resolve those two concepts with one another?
I don't know what he was talking about.
Strange.
Because he was really saying that according to the law, censorship was when the government would stand in and not let something be shown, right? Wasn't that what? So it's like when a governmental entity will step in and prevent art from being distributed or shown, then that's censorship. And he's against that. But then when they would go talk about obscenity, he was like, oh, well, there are laws against obscenity. If I go, that's true with New York Times. That's true with the local newspaper. That's true with this very show. If you go show some obscene stuff, then you'll be, arrested for it. And everybody will be down there and they'll shut you down and all of that. And I was just thinking like, didn't you just say the same thing kind of twice? And I get he's a lawyer. So he's speaking in like very specific distinctions. I'm sure that there is a legal difference between the two in the sense of, but like, I think that it's a very fine line, and he seemed to treat it like it was so cut and dry. Like this should be something so clear, and it wasn't so clear to me. I just feel like there exists a huge gray area in the Venn diagram between making obscene things and censorship. Now, could you argue that censorship prevents you from making the thing in the first place, but obscenity or obscene content is when you put it out to the masses as if it was like it's a misrepresentation of the thing. For example, adult films. To say that you can't make adult films is censorship. But then to say that you can make adult films, you just can't show them at AMC theaters down the street, or the Lemley, then that's obscenity. Like there's a place and time for that. Censorship is when the government would step in and like stop you from doing something, but obscene or like, so that's the only distinction that I could make out of that, because it was very confusing to me as well.
And I suppose when you put it that way, I can sort of appreciate that. I may not necessarily agree with it, but I can sort of at least see what what he might be talking about.
It's the old parental guidance thing from when Two Live Crew was big and NWA was big, and and Tipper Gore took the stand and they had to create the parental advisory sticker. I'm old enough to remember these trying times, and. Right. So, but censorship would say you can't make that. And that's what a lot of people were trying to say at that time is you can't make that. That's obscene. But the obscenity rule is like, you can make it. You just have to you can't sell it at Kmart, it's got to go back, or have a sticker or have a special case or something like that. And I think this has been something that we've wrestled with as a culture and society with art throughout all of the ages,
Yeah, definitely.
It's like how artists, you find out how artists hide little statues of, or sculptures of monks with their dicks out or whatever, in church monasteries, and they're just like up in the corner because they just wanted to sneak something in there, What was allowed and not allowed has been, and how it will affect society is something that, staunch conservatives have been wrestling with forever. And so, in society and how do we present, it's like, okay, you're free to make it, but what do we do with it then? If you're free to make it, what are you making it for? You're making it to put it out, right? Or are you just going to hide it away in your bedroom? Is this just for you? In which case that, falls under fair and personal use. But if you're going to put it out there, what do we do with it? Where do you put it out there and how? And I want to know about it.
I guess
but that was my take on that.
Yeah, no, and that's interesting. Yeah, and I guess talking to you, I could, again, I maybe wouldn't agree with it, but I guess I could see an argument where it's like, look, the laws exist. If somebody wants to break the law and suffer the consequences for that, they should be allowed to, as opposed to us saying you're not allowed to break the law at all. Maybe that's where he's coming from, right? Don't censor the man. If he does a thing and he needs to, pay his dues to society for it, so be it. But just don't tell him that he can't do that. Maybe that was where he was coming from. I suppose I could see that. Yeah. Yeah. But yeah. So it seems like we had similar reactions where it's like, that feels a little bit like, talking out both sides of your mouth or having your cake and eating it too.
At first I did.
Yeah, but maybe as we break it down a little bit, maybe this is more what he meant by that.
I had to compare it again to, modern things. And for me, it was Two Live Crew and NWA. We went from, Jimmy Stewart saying panties 47 times to Two Live Crew singing, "Oh, me so horny, me love you long time." And having women on stage and all because it was a full-ass performance.
Sure. No
pun intended, but it totally was a full-ass performance with Two Live Crew. And they were bringing women out there and doing sexual acts, blah, blah, blah. There was a moment in time where we had to have a reset back in the late 80s, early 90s as well. And it's like, okay, let's say you can make this. What do we do with it? And how do we prevent our kids from seeing it or have some control in the process and all of that? So,
sure. Yeah. Yeah. No. Yeah. Very good. Happy that I brought that up and we could work through that. So gonna go ahead.
Don't just say you can't make it. You know what I mean? You can't ban that.
Sure.
And here we are. I live in the so-so state of Florida, and we're dealing with that same discussion right now over schools and children's books and all these things, and it's much less interesting, but because I disagree with all that, but but they're still having those discussions, and so history repeats itself. Where we will always deal with this.
We will always deal with this, exactly, 100%. We're going to go ahead and give this movie a formal rating here, but first, would like to remind you, if you haven't yet, go ahead and like this video. Please subscribe to our channel. And as well, if you have anything to say about this movie at all, about our review up to this point, agree, disagree with what we have to say, want to, shed some color on some questions maybe we asked, give your opinion, we would really love to hear from you. Please go ahead and drop those comments in the section below. Now, we do wrap up every episode of our long form episodes, that is, with our 3 adjectives feature, right? And this is just what it sounds like. It's a little feature where Ryan and I come up with 3 reactions to the film, right? 3 either words, phrases, sentences, etc. There's a lot of leeway on exactly how they look, but our sort of 3 words or statements that summarize our response to the film. So Ryan, gonna go ahead and let you take this first. What are your 3 adjectives you would say best describe your experience with Anatomy of a Murder?
Well, my first one I'm taking some liberties with, but I went with Outback Steakhouse dinner bread. I don't know. I don't know if you've ever had Outback Steakhouse dinner bread, but it's very unsuspecting. You're just thinking you're getting some bread, and then this like little warm log comes out, and this little ramekin of butter on this wood carving board. And but hot damn, that's like the best part of Outback Steakhouse to me is that warm freaking pumpernickel dinner bread, whatever it is. I don't know what kind of bread it is. I'm going to say it's pumpernickel because it's brown. It is so delicious. And this movie was like, it's a 2-hour and 40-minute legal procedural with blah, blah, blah. And like by Otto Preminger. And I'm thinking, and I look up that dude and he looks like a Bond villain. I'm like, oh God, here we go. So, but dude, this movie ripped. Like it's the Outback Steakhouse dinner bread of legal procedurals. So yes, very unsuspectingly good. Loved it. Every bit of it. The next one is Kong versus Godzilla, because I felt like Jimmy Stewart's like King Kong and George C. Scott's like Godzilla, and they're just going head to head, these 2 titans, and it's so much fun to watch. And then my last one is sugar-coated medicine, because it does kind of like make you take the pill of what would you do and ask a lot of inward questions and all of that. But it sugarcoats it with a Duke Ellington score and Jimmy Stewart and panties. So, hey, and the little dog drinking beer. So it's sugar-coated medicine. How about you, Jason?
Absolutely. Love those, man. Yeah. So these ones, sometimes I'll do one word, sometimes I'll do sentences. Went with the sentence side of things right now. Going to try to bring a slightly different flavor to each one of these. So my first one is a legal thriller in defense of American justice, right? This is a movie that, again, has a very profound respect for the American justice system and the way that prosecution and defense and liberties are granted to anybody committed of a crime. And again, this is in direct opposition to his experiences and his family's experiences working for the state, prosecuting people alongside Germany and Nazi Germany specifically. So being able to see some of those atrocities and lack of justice be implemented comes over here, has a great respect for how we do things, wants to present that in the framework of a film, right? The second adjective I have is a literary adaptation in admiration of the written word. And this is something, Ryan, that we didn't really talk about, but for as great as the script is and the screenplay, and you talked about the book from the gentleman, the Supreme Court and all of that, the screenplay is really smart and does like not only a lot of work with regards to questioning motives and presenting certain people, but one thing we didn't even talk about is like this film is actually very funny. And when you talk about sort of like that lighthearted breeziness of the film, I think that's just as much a part of that as the Duke Ellington soundtrack and some of these other elements that we talked about, is the fact that like they're constantly making these little jokes and these little winks and nods and especially the outbursts that Jimmy Stewart's character makes over the course of the film, right? Like there's just these very sort of funny sayings, and we even see the audience kind of respond to them in certain ways. And so
even when they're in the judge's chambers and they're talking about, well, we can't say panties, so what should we call them? And then they're like discussing amongst themselves, like, well, I did hear when I was in the war, I heard a French word, and I was like, but I think it's too vulgar. And he's like, well, most French words are. All these little back and forth quips was very smooth. I liked it.
Yeah, exactly. And then the last I have is a courtroom drama on the cool side of the pillow. Welcome to the cool side of the pillow. And that would be obviously the Duke Ellington soundtrack, doing a lot of work there. The sort of subtle camera work, not calling a lot of attention to itself. And just the overall, again, like there is just sort of like that, jazzy sense of cool that kind of like hangs over the entire proceedings, in addition to just the very sort of like traditional courtroom elements. So that's what I got here for my 3 adjectives. We are going to go ahead and wrap up with a formal star rating. I think I usually let you go first, so I'm going to take this one first, Ryan, and I will let you know that for Anatomy of a Murder, I am going 4 3/4 stars out of 5. Almost perfect film. I would watch this film again right now. Could do it. Which you say for a 2-hour, 40-minute film? Like, love it very, very much. So how about you, man? Formal star rating out of 5. What you got?
I'm giving this one 4.5 for all the same reasons. The magic trick worked for me. Time just flew by. I had a great time. I don't know that I would watch this again right now. Because it is, I know the plot now and the reveals and stuff. So, but I would watch it again, hands down. It's a very smart film. And if somebody hadn't seen it and wanted to, I'd watch it with them in a heartbeat. So yeah, 4.5 stars.
Awesome, man.
Real quick, before we get off topic, did you for once, before we get to our next bit in the puzzle here, did you for once at all throughout this whole film ever picture Jimmy Stewart as the lawyer chicken from Futurama? Because I did constantly. He even has a line, Jimmy Stewart, and I wrote it down. He's like, well, now, I don't understand some of your concepts. I'm just a humble country lawyer. And I'm just thinking, like, I'm just a chicken. I don't know things like panties. And
it could be a direct lift, right? Because he does say that. He's like, no, I'm just a humble chicken from the backwoods.
Yeah, correct. I think that's part of what they're parodying.
Yeah,
is,
definitely.
Jimmy Stewart in this movie. Yeah, I never knew that.
I didn't think about that, but I'm absolutely going to now. So appreciate it. Thanks for that.
Well, I'm just a humble country lawyer. Yeah.
I'm just a humble backwoods chicken from a nearby planet.
We don't have things like wives and murder. I don't know. Most of my friends that were murdered came breaded with a side piece. Biscuit.
All right. Well, before we leave, going to go ahead and look ahead to our next full-length review that we're going to pull from our master list.
The master list.
Yes. You're probably asking what the hell's a master list. Master list is about 200 movies. It's exactly 200 movies that comprise the list of films that we choose from at the end of all of our long form episodes. So we do have our shorter form 30 and 40 minute episodes that are a bit more high level. And then we have these sort of 2-hour deep dives that we're doing on our films, right? And these 2-hour deep dives are like reflective of what we used to do on the podcast back when we were audio only. And that's really what we're interested in, is really diving into the meat and potatoes and specifics of what creates our reactions to all of these films and all of the different aspects of filmmaking alongside that, right? So what we've decided is that because basically Ryan and I are indecisive bastards. And so it was like, well, we don't want to sit here and get into arguments over what film to look at. So let's just go ahead and leave the process up to fate. So we have a master list that you can find on our website, esotericacinema.com, that has all 200 films that are on there. And we're going to go ahead and select right now a random number from the random number generator that we use at random.org. And that number is going to correspond to the next film that we do our deep dive review on. So, Ryan, as we select our random.org random number generator here, we click on it and find that we have got film number 170. So if you're on the website right now or you have the master list open, go ahead and go to film number 170. And we have a film that I have actually had on my radar for a long time. This is a foreign film, a European film, I believe, called The Square. And if I recall correctly, I think there's a chance this might be made by the same gentleman who made Triangle of Sadness recently. We'll find out in your description right here.
Ruben Östlund's The Square from 2017, starring Elizabeth Moss. This is described as a prestigious Stockholm museum's chief art curator finds himself in times of both professional and personal crisis as he attempts to set up a controversial new exhibit. I know nothing about this movie. I've never heard of this movie until right now. Only I've heard of Ruben Östlund and Elizabeth Moss. So anyway, I'm looking forward to seeing this and learning more about it. Looks like it won a bunch of awards.
Yeah, this is a really storied film, kind of made Ruben Östlund's career. This is a film I know very little about. That's just one of those films that's like it's on a ton of secret movie club out here. Those type of revival houses show it all the time.
Sure.
And famously, one of the things is like a lot of the American films obviously we're familiar with, but I don't have a big history with foreign films. So when we see something that's like highly regarded, I do my best to like not learn anything about it at all. That way we can just come to it with like a purely open mind.
Sure.
We don't really know if why it's celebrated or what's supposed to be good about it, so we can just look at it through a purely objective lens. So this is one that I've had on my radar for a long time. Really looking forward to checking this one out with you and seeing what this Mr. Ruben Östlund is all about. So
hell yeah.
Thanks. Yeah, so to everyone here who stuck around for this entire 2-hour deep dive, appreciate hanging out with you guys. Hopefully you had some fun with us. I learned a little bit something about film, as well as the specifics behind why you may or may not like Anatomy of a Murder. So for myself, Jason Peters, and my buddy Ryan Siebold, this has been Esoterica Cinema. Enjoy the movies.